Welcome, today's story is full of drama. Like and subscribe to stay updated. Let's get started.
We didn't marry young like many of our friends did. We were both 25 when we tied the knot. We had a good run, or so I thought. I worked a blue-collar job, clocking in hours and earning decent money. She was the epitome of a stay-at-home wife. I really believed we were doing well, 16 years of that belief, actually. But I was wrong. I found out not only did my wife not love me, but she had actually despised me for years. She held me in contempt, and I think she still does, though now I'm the one calling the shots. Looking back, maybe I deserved it. I definitely took her love for granted and far too much else. I've come a long way, though. I'm mostly over it now. Took me a couple of years of absolute hell to process everything. I only got through it with the help of a woman who was, and still is, way out of my league. I won't forget any of it, though. Every painful detail. My name's Jason Whitmore. My ex-wife, Vanessa, was the center of my world for nearly 21 years, counting the 4 years before we even married. That marriage, that life, and that heart of mine all died almost 4 years ago today. Our anniversary. The good news is, my life and my heart were eventually brought back to life, thanks to that amazing woman who helped me heal. That first marriage, though, it's gone. Gone for good. Tossed aside and forgotten where it belongs. But well, there's a story behind it. The boss had assigned me a job that was going to take me all day, even if I worked through my lunch hour, on my freaking anniversary. I was the warehouse supervisor for Dalton Logistics. Richard Dalton, the owner's son and my boss, had told me that I had to handle the assignment myself. He didn't trust anyone else to do it right, he'd said. At first blush, I felt kind of good that he had that kind of confidence in me, in spite of it being my anniversary. But then I started thinking, why this particular job? The task was to collect all of the data, mileage, and expenses for each of the company's many vehicles for the past year. We had receipts, hard copies for all of that. Why did I have to double-check something so mundane? Heck, Megan in accounting could do the job better and faster than I could. I went to her. She looked at me funny. What? Jason, gas, tires, oil changes, I can do that in 15 minutes. It's all in the computers. You don't have to pull all of the paperwork for this. Let me help you, she said. Megan, you're a lifesaver. I'll stay here with you while you pull it all up and verify it. The job was assigned to me after all, I said. I was smiling like a possum. The boss had said I could go home to my wife when I got it all done. He didn't know it was our anniversary, but I had signed off for a half-day's annual leave a few days before that, so Vanessa and I could have enough time to really celebrate. I had plans. And anyway, I figured I'd be done by 11 a.m. at the latest. I was wrong. Megan got it all done by 9:30 a.m. Megan, I owe you a steak dinner for this one, I said. I'll hold you to that, she said. I kissed her on the top of her head, and she snarled at me in fun. I handed the keys to my backup, Brian Foster, and headed out. Our house was a good half-hour drive from the warehouse. I was thinking of the afternoon and evening of fun that Vanessa and I would be sharing. I was even planning on taking her shopping since I had gotten off this early. I pulled onto my street just before 11 a.m. There was a strange car in the driveway. Well, not strange, but a car that shouldn't have been there. It was my boss's car, Richard Dalton's, at 11 in the freaking morning. This did not look good. I drove past my house, around the corner, and parked on the next street. I padded home on foot. If what I thought was going on was, in fact, going on, I was going to be sick. Real sick. I slipped through the side gate and into the backyard, staying close to the wall. I hoped to catch my wife and her guest off guard. Moving closer, I could see them through the sliding glass doors. He had her kneeling on the couch. The scene was more than I could bear to watch. My emotions were all over the place. Even from where I was standing, I could tell that he was much bigger than I was physically. He was taller and heavier, which only made me feel more self-conscious. I felt a wave of nausea. I stood there now, in plain view but still outside the doors, unsure of what to do next. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse. It did. He made a sudden movement, and she reacted loudly enough for me to hear from where I was. She turned toward me, and our eyes met. Her hand went to her mouth in surprise. I must have looked defeated, standing there with my hands at my sides, my expression full of sorrow. She wrinkled her brow and slowly shook her head in what I figured had to be sympathy. She mouthed my name. She said something to her lover. His head snapped around. He looked shocked for a moment but then spread his hands out in a "you caught me" gesture. He followed that with a smile. I turned and walked away. I had no idea where I was going. Not a word had been said at the house. I had to figure that our marriage was over, but I had no clue about how it might go down. One thing, I'd have to go back at some point and get my stuff. I'd figure that one out later and then look at my options. I headed for the nearest watering hole. I needed a drink. Or 8. Or 10. Richard Dalton was my boss, but I couldn't work for him anymore. I'd go in when I knew he wasn't going to be around and resign. Get my accumulated vacation pay and severance. I'd worked for Dalton Logistics for almost the whole of my married life. I'd started with the old man as a loader, was promoted to checker, then warehouse supervisor. But since the old man had gone semi-retired, I'd been working for Richard. He treated me all right, but evidently he was treating my wife even better. "So what are you going to do?" said Tom. Tom was the bartender at the Hard Hat. "I don't know. I need to get my things, but I'd rather avoid the inevitable confrontation." "Guess there's no way around it, though," I said. Just as Tom was about to respond, a tall, striking woman with a fit, athletic build approached the bar for a refill of whatever she was drinking. "Fill it up, Tom," she said before turning to me. "What's the matter, sad sack? Got some troubles?" Tom glanced up from filling her glass. "Give him a break, Samantha. Jason's got reason to be down," he said. She just looked me up and down as if trying to decide just how big a chicken I really was. Satisfied with her appraisal, but apparently not about to share it, she headed back to her table, where a soldier was waiting for her. "Name's Samantha Blake. Samantha's a good woman, Jason." "She didn't mean anything by what she said," said Tom. "Say, you want a suggestion?" "Yeah, for sure," I said. "Do it. Get your stuff. But at 3 a.m. She'll be tired and he won't be there unless he's already moved into the house. In which latter case, you gotta get a sheriff to go with you," said Tom. "Especially if he's as big as you say." I looked over at him. "Hey, that's a good idea," I said. "You must be some kind of genius." "I'll do it tonight. Get it done, fast and furious." "You got it," he said, wiping down the bar in front of me. I drove down the street in front of my house slowly. The lights were all out. Well, it was 3 in the morning. The lover's car was gone. I wondered how long he'd stayed after I'd left. I figured probably not long. But who knew? I killed my lights before pulling in. I was hoping to catch her asleep. I was disappointed. Inside, I headed for the hallway of our one-story ranch-style house. I had not turned on any lights. The voice from the dark startled me. "It was only sex, Jason. Not love. You don't have to worry about that," she said. She turned on the little end-table lamp by the couch where she had been screwing him earlier that day and where she was now seated. I stared at her, but I said nothing. I headed down the hall to what had been our bedroom. I pulled 2 suitcases out of the walk-in and began loading them. 2 minutes later, she appeared in the doorway. "What?" "Nothing to say to me," she said. I stopped and looked at her. I let out a long sigh. "I love you, Vanessa. But not enough to share you with that a-hole," I said. "Oh, and happy anniversary. I mean, yesterday." She winced at that. It was clear she'd forgotten. That was one little detail, especially that one, that still wrinkled. "Jason, it was only sex. Can't you process that in your head?" she said. "And I'm sorry about our anniversary." God, how sorry I am about that. Jesus, what a mess. How could I forget our anniversary? I had continued to pack. I stopped. "Good question, Vanessa. It's supposed to be the man that forgets those sorts of things, isn't it? But I guess we got our roles messed up somewhere along the line," I said. "Whatever. I guess you won't have to worry about remembering stuff like that anymore after today, since I have clearly lost both my wife and my job." "Well, we ain't got no kids. Lucky thing, I guess. All we have, you and I, are 16 and more years of love and marriage. At least that was true in my case until now. At least you haven't lost your marriage. Or your job," she said. "I talked to him about it after you left. He understands how you must feel. He told me to tell you that everything is the same. There's no need to go overboard here," she said. "Nothing has to change. Nothing. You know, he thinks you do a great job for the company. He doesn't want to lose you." "Well, he has anyway, Vanessa. It occurs to me that you've not said the 2 things that might have kept me around," I said. Might have. She frowned. "Huh," she said. "You have not said you were sorry you made a cuck of me. And you have not said you loved me. I've said that to you. But you've not said it to me," I said. She smirked. "Of course, I love you, silly. And I am very sorry you saw that today. I mean that. You didn't need that. I know it. And I am very sorry," she said. "And what about him, Vanessa? You gonna keep seeing him? Keep screwing him and his big tool?" I said. The bitterness was creeping into my words now. She looked down. "Jason, let's talk about this in the morning, okay? Just put those suitcases down and let's go to bed. I will make it right by you in the morning, okay?" she said. "You didn't answer me," I said. "Jason, yes, I'm going to keep seeing him. But it doesn't have to break us up. I love you, not him. And he knows it. You have been my rock for all of these years. I need you. And I want you. He's just a diversion, nothing more," she said. Now it was my turn to smirk. "So your plan is to make me fully aware of this instead of keeping me in the dark? You expect me to just accept it and walk away quietly? That about right." I said. "Jason, you're seeing this all wrong. No one is going to think less of you. No one will even know about this except us," she said. "And of course, you're not just going to go off and sulk. Why would you even say that? No one but him and you. You'll both know exactly what this makes me. You'll both be looking down on me. He definitely will. And it won't be long before others find out and do the same. No, Vanessa. I won't be part of something that leaves me feeling humiliated and disrespected. Oh, and Vanessa? Just so you know, I spent half the day today crying. Have a good laugh at that, Vanessa. You've earned it." The anger and sadness were beginning to take over again. "I'll contact you in a day or two," I said. "I can't deal with this tonight, this morning." I slammed shut the second suitcase, grabbed the two of them, and hauled them down the hall and out into the night. She didn't follow me to the door, or call after me, or cry, or anything a wife of 16 years looking at a probable divorce might have been expected to do. I thought that telling. The tears came again as I drove. The Riverside Inn would be my address for the next few days while I found another place to live. The room was small. It stunk of sex. And it was likely inhabited by any number of thumb-sized life forms. But it was cheap. Cheap would be good. At least in the short run. I watched as the man left the lot around 10 a.m. I waited a couple of minutes, then headed into the warehouse yard. I parked and went up to the office. "Hi, Megan," I said to the accountant who'd helped me the day before. "I'm quitting. Need to process the paperwork fast. Can you help me?" "Jason, what's going on? Richard said you might be in and wanting to quit." "What happened?" she asked. "I caught him screwing Vanessa, and I can't work with him anymore. Can that be enough?" "I really don't want to talk about it, Megan. It kind of hurts," I said. She looked at me, stunned. "Ah, sure, Jason. I am so sorry. It happened to me too, you know. So I get it. 2 years ago, I caught Paul screwing a neighbor woman. I told her husband and he dumped her. Sorry, but for cause. I dealt with Paul the same way the husband and I even used the same lawyer," she said. I nodded. She got the message and got down to the paperwork immediately. The check for all of my accumulated vacation time, severance, and my last 3 days' regular pay was in my hand within an hour. Megan was good. $92,000 would give me a start. But I would need a job soon. I was pulling out of the lot just as my rival was pulling back in. He stopped. He rolled down his window and said something to me that I couldn't hear at first. I paused, gave him the finger, and was about to head out, but lingered a moment longer. I wondered what it was he dared to say to me. "Jason, I'm sorry about that. Yesterday, I'm willing to negotiate all of this if you'll just come back inside and talk with me." "Just two guys talking," he said. My look must have been answer enough for him. "Okay," he said. "If that's the way it is." I drove out and away. I wondered what he'd meant by the term negotiate. I guessed I'd never really know. I spent the rest of the day setting up a new bank account, canceling credit cards, and doing all of the other usual self-defense stuff cuckolded husbands who were about to go through a divorce needed to do. I would give her the house, but no alimony. Hell, I didn't even have a job anymore. Anyway, Richard Dalton was married. I wondered if his wife suspected his philandering. Maybe that's what he wanted to negotiate, my not telling her. I wasn't sure I wanted to get involved with his home situation, though. Those kinds of things can backfire. But the more I thought about it, the more I was inclined to give Mrs. Dalton a call. I made the call. I think she fainted. When she came back on the line, she thanked me and promised to let me know in a choked-up voice what she decided. I told Vanessa that I would contact her in a day or two. We needed to settle a few things about the divorce. At least, that was my thinking. Well, it was only one day. But what the heck? The time to get it over with was now. I arrived at what had been my home at noon. I knew she'd probably be there. She was. And he wasn't. She was in the kitchen. "Hello," I said. I stood in the doorway. "Jason, what?" She looked frightened. "What?" I said. "You didn't call." She was looking furtively around. "I needed to call?" I said. "Well, no, but the ringing of the doorbell interrupted our conversation." "Jason, it's Richard. I was expecting him." She looked sad. "Oh," I said. "I guess I better get out of here, then," I said. "I don't want to come between you and your big tool." "Jason, I am so sorry." I knew that she actually was. And maybe even a little embarrassed. She went to the door. I was still in the kitchen. He wasn't going to make me slink out my own back door. I waited for him to come in and face me. Turned out that was a bad mistake. I could hear them talking. He raised his voice. "What the a-hole is in the kitchen?" I decided to face him down in the front room. I was pretty sure I knew what he was upset about. We were just a few feet apart when he snarled at me. "Scumsucker. You couldn't wait to tell my wife, could you?" he said. I had been right. I knew what he was upset about. Figured it was only fair. "Richard, you talked to my wife. And I talked to yours. Seems fair to me." That was the start of everything falling apart. The first punch left me winded. From there, it felt like every part of my body was targeted. I knew for a fact that I was a bloody mess. Everything hurt. I was certain that I had broken ribs. Maybe even a punctured lung. I could barely get a breath. I made to crawl toward the front door. I heard Vanessa screaming at him to stop. He finally did. Well, he stopped hitting me anyway. I sank to the floor, unable to go any farther. I was about to pass out from the pain. I felt something. I looked up to see if Vanessa was trying to revive me. But it wasn't her. Richard was humiliating me. Vanessa was still screaming at him to stop what he was doing. I don't know how I did it, but I made it out to my car and got in. I keyed the ignition and got out of there as fast as I could. I thought I saw George, our neighbor across the street. But I wasn't sure. I drove to the hospital and literally poured myself out of the car. I woke up in the predictably little green room. My chest was taped tight. I had an eye patch over one of my eyes. A splint on my right arm. I was pretty screwed up. But looking on the bright side, I wasn't dead. Somebody had taken the time to clean me up. I went out again. I must have been sedated. I woke up after 9 p.m. or so the clock on the wall maintained. I was thirsty. Very thirsty. There was a call button hanging from the bars on the side of the bed. I pushed it. A white-clad nurse came in and looked at me sympathetically. "How are you, sir?" she said. "Just peachy," I said. "But I'm dying of thirst. Any chance?" She smiled and left. She was back in less than a minute. "Here you are," she said. I gulped it down. Sir, your wife is here." "She's asleep in the waiting room. Under no circumstances is she to be allowed near me." "It was her boyfriend who put me in here," I said. "I know. He brought her here. And the police arrested him on the spot. Hours ago. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was going on. Seems a neighbor of yours saw you crawling to your car and called the police. I know because the cop that arrested the guy is my husband. He told me the whole story as far as he knew it. Your wife said you took a knife and attacked the guy. Started the fight." "Really?" she said. Said Nurse Elaine. Her name tag was large enough for my good eye to read. I said, "He beat me up because I told his wife about him and my wife." "I figured it might be something like that," said Nurse Elaine. I had a thought. "Nurse, I've changed my mind. If she's alone, I do want to speak with her," I said. "Really, sir? Are you sure?" she said. "Yes. But I will keep hold of this buzzer in case I need you, okay?" I said. "Okay. I'll get her," she said. She came to the door and peered in. When she saw me, she looked down. I thought I could detect a small sob. I couldn't be sure. She came toward the bed. "I am so sorry, Jason. He just lost it. His wife has kicked him out. That's why he went off on you like that. He's a real." "I guess," she said. I couldn't believe my ears. My personal 304 and her personal a-hole cheat on the a-hole wife. And his wife's the bad guy? But I contained myself. "Why are you here, Vanessa?" I said. "You're my husband, Jason." "Of course, I'm going to be here for you," she said. "Well, thank you for that. You been here all day?" I said. "Of course. I wouldn't leave you alone while you're like this," she said. I knew she had something else to say. But she was holding back for the right moment. I could smell it. We talked for some time about how I was feeling and such. And then she got to it. She was clever too. I had to give her that. You know, your insurance was canceled when you quit. But I made Richard reinstate you as a full-time employee so you would be covered while you're here, she said. She looked proud of herself. Okay. I knew what was coming next. Jason, do you think you could bring yourself? I know you're a kind-hearted person, she stopped. She was afraid to go on. I waited. As bad as I was feeling physically, I was feeling real good in other ways at that moment. Do you think you could not press charges against Richard? He is so sorry for doing this to you. He would like to make it up to you. And he promises, and I promise to not see you ever again, said my wife. I was so dumbfounded that I couldn't get my thoughts together for some moments. Vanessa, he humiliated me. Did you see that? He humiliated me. Never mind, I said. He damn near killed me. And then he humiliated me in front of you. Like no one ever humiliated a husband before. What did you think about that, Vanessa? What did you think about it? Did you enjoy seeing me like that? God, no, Jason. God, no. It was awful. I felt awful for you. I really did, she said. And yet you still went and talked to the a-hole? I said. I needed to make sure you got your job back, Jason. And the insurance, and he didn't mean to be so cruel to humiliate you like that, Jason. He just lost it. Let me ask you. Are you saying if I don't press charges that he won't interfere with our marriage anymore? Is that what you said a couple of minutes ago? You mean you'll come back to me? I mean as my wife. I said. You mean no more, you getting screwed with his big tool? She could see I was playing her. Her tone began to sound a little bit desperate. She really wanted to save the son of a he's a good man, Jason. He doesn't deserve to go to prison. Punish him, yes. But please don't send him to prison. Please don't do that to him, Jason. I promise our affair is done if you will only grant him a little mercy, she said. I promise to make it up to you in spades, too, if you will do this little thing for me. For him. I stared at her. You say you're done with him if I don't press charges? I asked. Yes, she said. But if I do press charges, you'll keep seeing him? Jason, that's not what I meant at all. Not at all, she said. And our sex life? Yours and mine? I asked. She smiled. She began to feel a little more relaxed. More in control, maybe. Close to getting what she was asking for. When I said I would make it up to you, that's exactly what I was talking about, young man, she said. Now it was my turn to smile. No, Vanessa. No second chances for me. I finally understood the message. I know you don't care for me anymore. I wouldn't want to be involved with you again. As for pressing charges, I haven't decided yet. If I choose not to, it'll be for reasons of my own. I might not have all the answers, Vanessa. But I definitely have my pride. And I won't be anyone's fool. You better leave now. It's over between us. I'll let you know about the charges later. But there won't be any second chances for you. Just go, Vanessa. We really are done as husband and wife. Your lover almost killed me. I won't be giving him another chance, I said. She started to go. She was halfway to the door. I called after her. Vanessa. She stopped. I really have loved you. Hell, part of me probably still does. Goodbye, Vanessa. I said. She started to say something, but just nodded instead. I was once again alone with my thoughts. I pressed charges. He was brought up on aggravated assault. But as I thought might be the case, Vanessa testified against me. She told the court I had attacked him with a knife. An out-and-out lie. The judge, who seemed to know the attorney for the defense really well, knocked the charges down to simple assault. He got 60 days. The judge didn't seem to believe that he had to do all that he did to me just to defend himself, but allowed that, though he had gone a little too far in the heat of the moment, that good old Richard had been provoked by the alleged knife attack by me. As Vanessa was telling her lies, I stared at her with unadulterated hatred. I vowed that someday I would have my turn. She never met my eyes. I was stunned that the judge never picked up on that. It was a month later that I was served with divorce papers. I should have filed myself, but I had decided to let her or her boyfriend pay for it. Bad mistake. The court date was short. She proposed and I counter-proposed. She asked for the house. She got it. She asked for alimony. She'd get it when I got a job. She asked for half of my vacation and sick leave accruals. She got those too. She asked for half of my retirement. She failed there. I guess I had to be grateful for small favors. She sneered at me when we left the courthouse. I just looked at her coldly. Her boyfriend was still inside but would be getting out in a few days. He would no doubt be buoyed by the fact that my ex-wife had screwed me over in the divorce. Well, there it was. I was financially ruined. My wife of 16 years had cucked me. I was depressed as hell. And the supreme irony? I still needed her sexually. I guessed I always would. But I would be losing out there too. I wasn't sorry I'd gone ahead and preferred charges against the a-hole. I had to do it. He had robbed me of my life and my wife. I'd had to do something. She had taken half of my stake. I'd had to find a job in a hurry. I got lucky and got one, doing about the same thing I had been doing. But now I was an assistant. The company was a subsidiary of Silverline Enterprises. I made about 2/3 what I had at Dalton Logistics. And 1/3 of that went to Vanessa. I was hurting. Another irony? When Silverline Enterprises checked to get my references and work history, Richard had given me a good one. I wasn't sure if that was because he wanted to make sure I made the alimony payments to my ex-wife or if Megan had maybe had something to do with it. But it did help me get my assistant supervisor position. Who said that life wasn't stranger than fiction? For the last few months before the divorce was final, I found myself in tears almost every night. I hated feeling so vulnerable. But it was hard to escape. I knew it. And yet I couldn't seem to do anything about it. Regardless, I found a way to cope. My go-to remedy was always available from Tom, my local bartender who never hesitated to give me what I wanted. And I definitely took advantage of that. The papers separating me permanently from my cheating spouse arrived right on time, some 8 months after the incident with Richard. I was free, but alone. And yes, frightened. Shaky. A couple of weeks after I got the final papers, I got a call from Megan, my ally at Dalton Logistics. The dynamic duo had married in Vegas. Well, big surprise. It was 7 p.m. a couple of days later, and I had been ensconced in my usual location at the end of the bar, sipping my usual. A not-too-dry martini with 2 Spanish olives. Well, what do you know? It's Satsak, said an all-too-carefree female voice behind me and to my left. Well, if it isn't Body Beautiful herself, I retorted after a lazy glance in the direction of the interruption. She laughed. Well, I'm glad to see you can appreciate the gorgeousness of the female form at its best, she said. There may be hope for you yet. Not much, but some. Let me know when you decide, I said. She laughed again. Look, she said, turning serious, Tom told me about your divorce. Bummer. But *T happens. That's life in the big city, as they say. I was alone. I was hurting. And still crying in my lonely beer. Well, martini. But who gave a damn? Like to join me for a drink? I said, out of the clear blue sky. She looked me up and down, and then took a seat. Okay. Bourbon, neat, she said. Tom had been watching the little scene and showed up with her drink already poured. So, you're still lost and lonely? She said. You could say that, I said. It's not something you get over quickly. No, I guess not, she said. You know, Jason, you're a good guy. No need to be too hard on yourself. Just decide to move forward. Find someone who appreciates you and treats you right. She'll help you heal and leave the past behind. Yeah, well, that's what I thought I had. I didn't, I said. Touché, she said. Anyway, there are plenty of star-quality women out there. Trust me. I know. You just need to take the time to find one. I looked at her like she had hit on something. She noticed. What? She said. You want to go out sometime? I mean, with me? I said. Me? You? I mean, with you? She said. Yeah. I'm on the hunt for a star-quality woman. You it? I said. I was figuring that, at worst, she would demur and then maybe back off the pressure. Well, I saw it as pressure. You're a man, she said. I looked at myself, confused. You're right. I never realized until now. What am I going to do? I'm just a man. She burst out laughing. You still haven't answered me, I said, turning serious. Okay, she said. But just remember, I never kiss a guy on the first half of the first date. Huh? I said. Now she laughed even harder. We decided to take a chance and hit a country western bar and grill I knew about. The likelihood of running into a swarm of rednecks might be increased, but hell, it's a free country. Screw the a-holes in it. The Chili Pepper Club was crowded, but I was able to spot a small high-rise drinks table with 2 equally high-rise bar stools empty beside it. We grabbed them. I signaled the bar girl with the tray. There was always a bar girl with a tray in sawdust joints, and she took our order and headed off to fill them. The drinks came, and we talked, sipped our beer, and watched the activity heat up on the dance floor. I was in rare form for a guy who should have been crying in his beer. Samantha laughed at almost everything I said. I wasn't sure if she was employing her brand of therapy or just impressed with my eloquent wordology. Somebody started a line dance. We left our coats and drinks at our table and hit the floor. It was there that we got a few not-too-friendly looks from a couple of lowball cowboy wannabes. We ignored them and did our thing. It was fun. Dance over, we headed back to our table. Two newbies had appropriated it. "Hey, fellas. This is our spot," I said as politely as I could. "You weren't here." "We are now," said the larger of the two a-holes. I was ready to go at it, but Samantha put her hand on my arm and warned me off. The bar girl was back, picking up our drinks. "Let it go, Jason. It isn't worth it," she said. I was miffed, but I knew she was right. But right then, the big one crossed the line. "Tell you what, buddy boy. Your friend there goes outside with me for a little R&R and we'll buy you a drink. How's that?" he said. The arrogance on the man's face was way over the top. I never even saw it coming. Samantha's foot literally flashed. The big guy squeaked rather than yelled and slipped to the floor. He was clearly going in and out of consciousness. His kneecap, if not actually broken, was seriously bruised. His eyes glazed over, and he seemed about to conk out. "Be careful who you proposition, a-hole," said Samantha. By now, a dozen bodies had surrounded us. I heard the a-hole. "Max," said the bartender to the guy with the baseball bat. He had it coming. Same as last time. The guy with the club, I think it was the barkeep, just nodded and told the goofball to get the hell out and take his fallen comrade in arms with him. The cops arrived just as the two a-holes were making it to the door. The wannabes, looked sheepish. Well, they had been humiliated by a girl. In a way, I could kind of empathize with them. Humiliation was something I knew a lot about. They questioned us and some of the bystanders. One of the latter came forward. Shaved head. Tattoos. Nasty-looking fellow. "Officer, I know this lady. She was a DI at Fort Brighton a few years back." "The a-hole picked on the wrong woman tonight," he said. "Hi, Sergeant," said Mr. Nasty-looking to Samantha. "Back at it, huh?" she responded. "Private Springer, Sergeant," he said, identifying himself. She smiled. She didn't know him, but they were both Marines. We were warned by the police not to cause any more ruckus or they wouldn't be so tolerant the next time around. The fact that the a-holes had caused the problem seemed to get lost in the telling. Go figure. But the cops didn't harass us anymore that night. I was grateful for that. A Marine. And not only a Marine but a drill instructor? I said. "You never asked," she said. "How was I supposed to ask about that?" I said, almost giggling. "It doesn't bother you?" she said. "Hell no," I said. "I think it's interesting as hell." She looked at me quizzically. "Most men don't like it when they find out," she said. "I was hoping to get to know you better before I told you my life story." "Well, the cat's out of the bag," I said. "The milk is spilt. Water over the dam. Whatever. Give." She sighed. "Okay, but just the short version tonight," she said. I nodded. We were poor and didn't have many options. My brothers let me work out with them and I got really strong really fast for a girl. When I graduated high school, I took the ASVAB and scored a 92. Well, I had been hanging with my brothers and I was an A student. The Marines took me. I made squad leader in a year and was given temporary command of a platoon for a short time. I made buck sergeant. Colonel Stansfield saw what I was doing, checked me out, and I eventually ended up at Fort Brighton, schooling raw recruits. Had that duty for 7 years before I mustered out. I was in for a total of 20 years, she said. I looked at her like she was lying. You were in the service for 20 years? No way, I said. You look like you're 25. She snickered. Right. Well, I'm 41. Just, she said. Hole, I said. I take it you're pretty good at self-defense and all? Very good, she said. I'm not bragging. I'm just informing you. Huh. I wish I was. There are a couple of a-holes I could name who I'd love to be able to dance with. I mean, like you, I said. I could train you, she said. Might be fun. We laughed and danced and drank some more and put the incident with the a-holes behind us. Finally worn out, we had one for the road and decided to head out. The ride back from the club was slow. She nuzzled me, leaning over and putting her hand on my leg. High up on my leg. I looked over at her. I think we're on the second half of our first date, I said, sounding as serious as I could. She took my face in her 2 hands and leaned in and kissed me as I tried not to run into a tree or something. God, she tasted good. We went to her place. Have a seat. They'll be right back, she said. She wasn't. It took her 10 minutes. When she did return, she was wearing a black, knee-length negligee and carrying 2 glasses of white wine. She sat beside me on the couch. We tilted glasses, sipped our wine, and said absolutely nothing. It would have broken the mood. She kissed me. I kissed her. I let my hands roam up and down her arms. I knelt down in front of her on the floor and lifted her nightie, but not too much. I wanted to go slow. As I stood in front of her, she gave me a BJ. It was the best BJ I had ever gotten. I lifted her up and pulled her down on the floor with me. I began screwing her slowly and steadily. We lay there for some moments, trying to regain some semblance of routine in our breathing rhythm. Before the night was over, I had her 3 more times. The most in my entire life. But I can't take all of the credit. She did a masterful job of getting me up when I was sure I couldn't get it up no matter what she did. Sex with Samantha looked promising as hell. The next morning, I lay on the bed, lost in thought, while my new companion was showering. The sting of betrayal still lingered, but I was starting to regain a sense of self-respect. Being with someone like Samantha was a completely new experience for me. She had a striking beauty that I couldn't help but admire. I couldn't wait to see Vanessa's reaction when she found out I was with someone who outshined her in every way. It was almost embarrassing. Meanwhile, Vanessa. She watched him as he got off the bed. Completely bare. She had to admit he had been impressive in many ways. His skills were hard to match. He headed for the bathroom to clean up as he still had a company to run. Mrs. Richard Dalton I had dumped him and screwed him over even worse than she'd screwed over her ex-husband, Jason Whitmore. She was Mrs. Richard Dalton now. The downside to that little reality was that Richard wasn't exactly all that when it came to husbandship. But that was okay. She had options. She relaxed, waiting for him to come out. The coffee was on downstairs and they would have a roll or two, sip their coffees, and talk some before he had to go. She was waiting for him and just pouring their cups when he came down. She sat and watched him hang his coat on the back of an empty chair. He took his seat across from her. "You look satisfied, little lady," he said. Yes, she said. "Heard something about your ex today," said Richard. She perked up. "Jason?" she asked. "Yeah. He's dating someone," he said, suddenly bursting into laughter. "I just can't help it. What does that say about his ability to attract women?" "He attracted me," Vanessa said indignantly. "Exactly," Richard replied. Vanessa was clearly frustrated. "Well, I'll tell you, mister. If it weren't for your charm, you wouldn't have attracted this woman, that's for sure. And if you don't get it together and start acting a little more like Jason, you might not be around much longer," she snapped back. "Mercy, mercy," said Richard. "Tell you what, let's go dancing tonight. I heard of a place that sounds like it could be fun. What do you think?" She glanced at him and seemed a little more at ease. "All right, but you better be on your best behavior. Got it?" she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Yes, indeed, ma'am," he said, trying his best to hold back his laughter. He did enjoy dancing, and it had been a while since they had gone out. Back to Jason. The chance to finally confront the one who had betrayed me, my former boss. My ex. And the person I had once cared for deeply took time to arrive. In fact, it was more than a year after the divorce was finalized. And of all places, it happened at the Chili Pepper. Talk about déjà vu. Samantha and I had been sitting at our usual table for half an hour when that former love of my life arrived on the arm of her new and improved, larger-than-me love of her life. I nodded in the direction of the door, and Samantha took note. This was going to be interesting. She had never been formally introduced. But she, Samantha, had been at the divorce hearing. And she was there the day of the final decree. So she knew what they looked like. It had been a matter of circumstance that my ex and her lover had not realized who Samantha was at the time. Vanessa was casting around to see if she knew anyone. When her gaze fell on me, she smiled. It was clear she was amused by the color of my companion. She nudged Richard. He turned. At first, he looked surprised. Then, he looked as if he had won the lottery. They headed for us. I nodded in the direction of the approaching storm. Samantha took note. This was going to be interesting. She had never been formally introduced, but she had been at the divorce hearing and the final decree signing. She knew what they looked like. It had been a matter of circumstance that my ex and her lover had not realized who Samantha was at the time. "Well, fancy meeting you here," said Vanessa. I just smiled back at her and nodded. I was determined not to let my mouth put my foot in it. "I see you're expanding your cultural base," said Richard. I remained silent, but my smile faded. I looked over at Samantha. I could have been wrong, but I had the feeling that she was doing all she could to keep from breaking out laughing. I didn't see what she found that was so funny. "Well, ta-ta," said Vanessa, and the two of them wandered off to find a table. We hadn't said a word to either of them. "Am I wrong?" I said. Or were you about to break out laughing at good old Richard? A little wrong. It's amusing what a complete fool he is. He had no call to come over to us and insult me. Was he? Bad move on his part. That's how losers like him make themselves feel big. He's not. The fact that your ex is hanging with him brings her down in class too, said Samantha. I looked at her, realizing for the first time, or maybe more clearly than before, just how grounded and self-assured she was. This young woman of mine had a remarkable inner strength that made her incredibly resilient. The dancing started soon after the other two found their table. There was no contest, per se, but it was clear that Richard and Vanessa were trying to outdo us. They had no chance. He was too big to ever be a really good dancer, and Vanessa was clearly not in the best of shape for a long night's exercise. We, on the other hand, were. Samantha had damn near killed me getting me into shape during the past year. The fact that I was in my early 50s cut no ice with her. As far as she was concerned, I was a recruit and I was less than dirt while we were working out. The upshot was that, in the final analysis, my hands and feet were almost as fast as light and they never tired. On the upside, the good news was that my dancing skills were mightily enhanced as a result of all the murderous pain and gains she put me through. It was almost 10 p.m. and I hadn't hardly broken a sweat. And in Samantha's case, there wasn't even a hardly involved. Our competitors, however, were sweating a lot and gasping audibly by the end of each dance. It was a mystery to me why they were trying to keep up with us. Well, maybe it was ego. Had to be ego, I guessed. After an especially intense dance, we made our way back to our table, passing by theirs in the process. Until now, no words had been exchanged since their initial remarks earlier in the evening. That changed. It was Vanessa this time. She was slightly out of breath. Her expression sharp. Your little dancer has a lot of stamina, she said. I stopped and looked directly at her. Apologize, Vanessa. And I mean now. Oh, I'm sorry, she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. I meant to say, your little piece of fluff. Get on back to your table, little man, said Richard, backing up his wife. Forget you, I said sharply. Samantha just stood back, her smile present but completely devoid of amusement. Richard, not wanting to tolerate being spoken to like that by someone like me, took the bait. I'm going to make you regret that, he threatened. He took a step toward me to shorten the gap between us. I was wearing steel-toed cowboy boots. My right boot met his left knee in mid-stride. That was followed by several hooks and a right cross that flattened him and laid him out right then and there. He was semi-conscious. I looked at Samantha and smiled. No one wanted to get involved with Samantha. Everyone stepped back as I confronted him, determined to turn the tables on him in the way he once had with me. His humiliation was complete and on display for everyone to see. Vanessa was crying, looking around for a place to escape. But there was nowhere to hide. I glanced at her. Paybacks AB****, huh? I said. She just scowled and then howled. She came at me, wanting to hit me. Samantha stepped between us and slapped her. She hit the floor beside her husband. Samantha and I returned to our table as though nothing had happened. Every eye in the place was on us. And the buzz was palpable. Max came by our table 5 minutes later. You ever pee on my floor again, I'll shoot Yura, he said. But he was smiling. Okay, Max. It was payback. He did it to me years ago. I just couldn't let the opportunity slide, I said. He shook his head and walked off. Vanessa got a glass of water for her hurting spouse and got him back into his seat. They talked for a few minutes while he got his sea legs back, and then they left. He was limping noticeably. I was feeling good. It turned out that more in the way of revenge was on the horizon, and from a surprising source. I got a visit at work from a member of the Marine JAG's office. I was assigning the day's loading duties on the dock when the uniformed man approached me. Judge Advocate Generals. What do you want with me? I ain't in the Army, I said. Marines, he said. You know a certain Sergeant Samantha Blake? Yeah. So what? I said. Well, she asked us to do her a favor. Actually, it was my boss she asked. You have a place where we could speak privately for a moment. I motioned him to follow me. The looks I got from the crew were amusing. We stepped into my small office in the warehouse, and I shut the door. He reached into his bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. This is for you, he said, setting it on the desk. What is it? I asked, eyeing it with suspicion. Evidence, he said casually. We've had an interesting file on a certain Judge Reynolds for a while now. But let's just say, your case made us look deeper. I slowly reached for the envelope, my heart beating faster. What kind of evidence? Call it leverage, he said, giving me a knowing smile. The kind that makes corrupt judges, shady lawyers, and perjuring ex-wives sweat a little. I looked at him, my expression unreadable. What does Samantha have to do with this? He smirked. She's got friends in high places. No kidding. I slowly opened the envelope and flipped through the contents. Photographs, documents, affidavits. Everything tied Judge Reynolds, Richard Dalton, and even my ex-wife, Vanessa, into a nice, neat little knot of corruption. And at the center of it, my divorce case, my so-called fair trial, a setup from the start. I let out a slow breath and looked up. This is a lot, I muttered. Oh, we're not done, he said, standing up. You didn't think we'd hand all this over just for fun, did you? I narrowed my eyes. What do you want? Simple. We need you to file a motion to reopen your divorce case. You were set up. You lost your assets, your reputation, and your dignity because of these people. We'll back you 100%. And let's just say, this time, you won't have a judge in their pocket. I sat back in my chair, considering my next move. Vanessa had lied under oath. Richard had beaten me within an inch of my life and had gotten 60 days for it. Judge Reynolds had knowingly let it happen. Now they were about to get exactly what they deserved. I tapped my fingers on the desk. Tell Samantha. I owe her one, I said. The Marine grinned. I think she already knows, he said. He nodded, then left. I sat there for a moment, staring at the pile of evidence in front of me. Then I picked up my phone. It was time to call my lawyer. The legal process moved faster than expected. Judge Reynolds was suspended pending an internal investigation. Vanessa was summoned to court for perjury. Richard? Oh, he was screwed 6 ways from Sunday. It turned out that not only had he been bribing Judge Reynolds, but he had also been embezzling funds from Dalton Logistics for years. When his father found out, let's just say Richard wasn't the heir to the family business anymore. The day Vanessa walked into court, she looked like she had aged 10 years. She saw me sitting at my lawyer's table and stopped dead in her tracks. Her eyes were wide with panic. She knew. She knew it was over. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically in her ear. She turned back to me, her face pleading. She knew I had her fate in my hands. And this time, she wouldn't be walking away with half of my assets. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Judge Reynolds resigned in disgrace before he could be formally disbarred. Vanessa? She took a deal. She agreed to return the alimony and the assets she stole in the divorce in exchange for probation instead of jail time. Richard? Oh, Richard went straight to prison. 5 years for embezzlement, fraud, and bribery. By the time he got out, Vanessa would have moved on. Or so I thought. A few weeks after the trial, I got a call from Samantha. You won't believe who I just ran into, she said, amusement in her voice. Let me guess, I said. Vanessa. Bingo. I sighed, rubbing my temple. What did she want? She asked about you, Samantha said. And, more specifically, if you might still have feelings for her. I barked out a laugh. She can't be serious. Oh, she's serious? Samantha chuckled. She said she made a mistake. A mistake. I repeated, stunned. Yep. Cheating on me? That was a mistake. Apparently. I shook my head. She's in desperation mode, I said. Yep. Richard's locked up. She lost all your money. She's got nowhere to go. Not my problem. Samantha laughed. Glad to hear it. I smirked. So, when are we celebrating? Tonight, she said. Dinner, dancing, and then, we'll see. I grinned. Sounds like a plan. That night, Samantha and I toasted to my freedom. We danced. We laughed. And as I held her close, I realized something. I had one. Not just in court. Not just against my ex. But in life. I had moved on. And for the first time in years, I was truly, completely happy. 1 year had passed since Vanessa had tried to crawl back into my life. I hadn't seen or heard from her since. Not that I cared. Life had been too good to waste time looking back. Samantha and I had moved in together 6 months ago. It was supposed to be temporary, a see-how-things-go kind of deal. But after the first month, it was clear we weren't going anywhere. She had become my rock. Not just in love, but in everything else, too. She kept me grounded, challenged me, and made me better. And she never let me slack off at the gym either. I had landed a promotion at work. Dalton Logistics was long behind me, and now I was managing my own team at Silverline Enterprises. The pay? More than double what I was making before. No more alimony checks draining my account. No more financial headaches. For the first time in years, I had real stability, and I had built it all on my own. One night, Samantha and I were at home, sitting on the porch, sipping bourbon. The stars were out, and the air was crisp. I looked over at her. She was smiling, staring up at the sky, content. I reached into my pocket, feeling the small box inside. I had been carrying it around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Cleared my throat. She looked over, raising an eyebrow. What? I took a deep breath. Then, I pulled out the ring box, flipped it open, and held it up. Her eyes widened. Her smirk disappeared for once. Samantha Blake, I said, will you marry me? She stared at me, speechless. Then she let out a laugh. A deep, genuine laugh. She shook her head, smiling. You dumbass. You really think I'd say no? I grinned. I'd hope not. She leaned in, kissing me fiercely. Then, she pulled back and whispered, yes. 2 years later, Samantha and I were happily married. The wedding had been small, just close friends and a few of my former coworkers. Even Megan and her new Marine husband had come. It was perfect, simple, honest, real. Nothing like my first marriage, because this time it was built on mutual respect, trust, and love. As for Vanessa, the last I heard, she had moved away, probably looking for another meal ticket. She hadn't reached out, and if she ever did, I wouldn't answer. Her story had ended. Mine was just beginning, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was meant to be. What do you think? Was justice served, or should Jason have done more? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories. Thanks for watching.